Hello everyone and welcome to Atom or A Touch of Multiplatform. My name is Pamela. I'm a developer advocate at JetBrains and I'll be one of your hosts for today, talking with the lovely folks from Meetup. My latest technology splurge, just as a little bit of an icebreaker, is the new iPhone Pro. I feel like a complete traitor because I used to be an Android engineer. I'm here with my co-host, Justin. Justin, won't you introduce yourself? And then Annyse and Colin as well, please.
Thanks, Pamela. I'm here on behalf of Touchlab. We've been partnering with JetBrains for a long time. And I recently splurged on a robot vacuum. That might give away a little bit about my lifestyle and my age, but it's been cool to actually learn about how it learns and makes maps. So that's been interesting. Annyse, could you please introduce yourself and tell us about a tech splurge you might have?
Okay, cool. Yes. So hello, I'm Annyse, VP of Engineering at Meetup. Also a huge fan of Android development and Kotlin. Recent tech splurge, I'll say my Pixel 7 Pro. I tend to keep my phone forever until literally it can barely start up. And I just took a chance and decided no, this time I want to have one of the newest phones, and I honestly really love it.
Cool. I'm still on a Pixel 3. I also keep my phones around a long time. And Colin, thanks for joining. Could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Colin Lee. I'm a senior Android engineer working at Meetup for the last couple of years. And I guess recent tech splurge, I bought a wireless Android Auto for the car, a dongle that would add the functionality to the car. I think it was Carsify. Yeah, but otherwise, I'm hoping maybe to get a new Pixel Fold or something really interesting to mess around with. And yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to ask Annyse and Colin, do you have any morning rituals that you can't do without or that you would recommend to our podcast listeners? Annyse, why don't you go first?
Morning rituals. I don't know if it's good, but I always have a cup of coffee. I just can't not. I've tried to switch to mushroom coffee. I've tried so many things to wean myself off coffee, but that is kind of my morning thing I do. But something positive I'll say is just drinking a cup of water every morning. Just a whole cup.
Keeping hydrated.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So I don't know if other people do that, but that's something I'll do.
Colin?
Honestly, I want to find a way to get my mind engaged right away in the morning, and usually that's a combination of drinking coffee when I'm feeding the pets and such, and then also spending a little time maybe on Duolingo, learning a new language, or doing a little strategy game or something. Just for a few minutes to get myself.
What language are you learning, Colin?
Honestly, Portuguese right now.
Yeah. I think obrigado. Is that right?
Thank you.
That's the only word I know.
I've tried to learn many languages in my life and I've never been able to do it, especially not in the morning. I'm on Annyse's side here. I'm just a glass of water, give me some caffeine. It's going to be a while before my mind can think about anything. Annyse, could you tell us a little bit more about Meetup and how the teams are structured?
Yeah, sure. So Meetup is very small. Since we've been around for 20 years, and I think people think of Meetup as a huge corporation, but it's just about 80 people. And so the way we structure our teams, we tend to have currently just two separate mobile pods. We focus on our different applications, our application for our members, and our application for our organizers. And then we have a few web teams who focus on different product verticals. So it's honestly a really small company, which is one of the things that I personally love about it, because you get to wear many hats and learn and play around with a lot of different technology.
Cool. So Annyse, how involved were you with making the technology decisions with the teams? How did you evaluate, for example, at Meetup, you're using Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile, but how did you evaluate things like other cross-platform technologies or versus native solutions and so on? How involved were you with that decision?
Yeah, I was really the driver of that decision. And I think it comes from the fact that my background is in mobile development. So prior to coming to Meetup, I was working on an Android application and a Flutter application. And being able to work on Flutter really opened my eyes to what's possible when you're working with like a cross-platform solution. There were things that I liked about it and things that I didn't like so much. So when KMM came out, it honestly seemed like the answer. It solved the bad parts and had so many of the good things. So even though I helped bring the possibility of KMM to Meetup, I still didn't want to just be so biased. Like, okay, I know Kotlin. I know a bunch of people who I could reach out to. I love working on Android, but I wanted to also just like have the team do some explorations to prove out if it was really like a good solution for us at that time.
Cool. How long ago was that?
How long has it been, Colin? Like,
It's been, definitely over a year. It's probably a year and a half, 2 years. We did several tech explorations. It wasn't just KMM. We did a multiple Jetpack Compose like mobbing sessions as a team. And I'll admit, actually, the first Jetpack Compose session went very badly because we set out to make a widget when they weren't supporting it. And it was just, everything went haywire with the tools. And the second time around, we started doing KMM and Jetpack Compose. Everything just sort of started to work. And it's like, wow, this is great. If you love this.
That's interesting. There's two parts there that I find interesting. One is the mobbing. A lot of people know about pair programming, but I think mob programming is more of a niche exercise. Could you explain what that is?
Well, the idea is that we're, as a team, we'll jump in and try to solve something together over, let's say, a Zoom feed or some kind of like chat room, basically. Either way, what we do is somebody will usually lead, open up their editor. We have experimented a little with code with me, but actually in our early explorations, it was just Zoom, just watching each other and commenting, trying to help each other along in the exploration journey. And usually what you'll try to do is you'll try to get the person who's maybe the more seasoned with the technology to try to take the keyboard initially. And then people could take turns as they're becoming accustomed to it. But what I've found is that people said if you do it nonstop and don't take breaks, people start dropping off like flies. You have to make them like limited duration with time for lunch and bathroom breaks for people, and it's just
yeah. They're still humans.
They're still human.
Yeah.
And so what was the benefit of utilizing mob programming for investigating something like Kotlin Multiplatform and Compose?
I think we were all learning together.
Yeah. Like I didn't want it to be like one person is like the expert. And now it's like we have the expert, no one else knows anything, and you just set up a knowledge silo. So unless this one person is around, guess we can't do anything on KMM. Like that's the worst thing that you can have. And I really didn't want to isolate the iOS engineers on the team either. So we wanted to like initially go about it as the mob programming so that everyone kind of understands what's happening. Even if you personally weren't driving the keyboard during the session. So for me, that was like really important, even though I know you move slower initially, like just looking from where we are now, I know that was definitely the right decision for the team.
It really says a lot about the culture you're building at Meetup. And then the second thing, I'm going to come back to that. I did think of two things. The other thing you were mentioning, like you tried multiple times and things changed over time that became better.
Right.
What were your initial impressions and how have they, in a little bit more detail, changed over time?
It's a good question. I think one of the things too, like I started using KMM very, very early when it was probably too cutting edge and you would end up bleeding on the floor. That was before I started at Meetup, and that was years ago. And I did some conference talks about what I did. And honestly, getting iOS to work back in those days was murder. I remember was a Marcin in Poland, like asking him for tips and hints of getting things working. But when we started using it at Meetup, by the time we were invested enough to do a mobbing session on KMM, it was feeling solid enough that we were actually getting immediate benefits. For example, Apollo, the GraphQL client, works cross-platform without any custom code on either platform. And that was in our very first mobbing session, we were pulling down data from our GraphQL server and able to demonstrate that on both clients. That was a huge win right away. Yeah.
Nice. I just want to contextualize, because I don't think we've gone into this. How are you using Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile at Meetup?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll take this one.
Oh, I'll take it. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
No worries. So first off, we started out with a brand new app. We wanted to build an app specific to the needs of our organizer audience. One of the problems I think over the years, we've had all this old kind of crusty code and legacy that's been in our Meetup app for the organizers. It's not getting maybe the attention it deserves, and the experience isn't there. It's we wanted the ability to like edit drafts and do all sorts of things that you couldn't do in the existing app. And we wanted to start with a fresh slate, build on Jetpack Compose and Swift UI, and do everything the right way in this new app. And this actually, at the same time we started to do this, I was thinking like we should be building a shared library as well as we go along. We didn't actually get to the shared library until a year into the project, because I created it and then we had so many problems initially figuring out how to make it work across both projects. But what happened is, though, after about 9 months to a year into our Meetup for Organizers product, which is entirely KMM and Compose and Swift UI, at that point we started building a shared library as well. So now we are building KMM components for all 4 apps, across 2 platforms and 2 app names, if you will.
That's very nice. So how's the project going at the moment, and do you think that the promised benefits of KMM have materialized?
It's going really well from my perspective. And for me, the most exciting thing is that like the iOS engineers can contribute to KMM now. And some of them have become really proficient in Kotlin. And in fact, they were pushing for the shared library. Like they were the ones who were like, you know what? We could probably share the whole checkout experience across all the apps. And then they were coming up with ideas on how we can make it happen. And so for me, that was the win. Like, we need to make this change. And now all of the apps get the change. Like we decided, okay, we're going to redo how a person, for example, creates a group. And now every app can benefit from that change. And it doesn't have to be, oh, the iOS team is ahead of the Android team. And oh, this app will get the benefit in a few months later. It's just like, no, everyone gets it. It's almost miraculous in a way. But it's very exciting. It's very exciting to see it. I hope that they would get to the point where they were making KMM libraries, but I didn't actually expect it to happen this soon. So I'm honestly really proud of the team for that work. And I just met with another one of the iOS engineers on the team who's also going to start learning Kotlin because they want to contribute to the shared library portion. And so it's just like such a long way from the essay that I received from one of the iOS engineers when I first mentioned KMM about all the downsides. So I'm like, wow, we've come a really long way from that point till today.
I feel like there's a story there too with the iOS, how everything went down. Because I feel like our iOS engineers are probably the big success story of this project. That they came around, I think in the early days, that some of the people who had been on the project were speaking on their platform meeting for iOS engineers to the other engineers. And they started telling them, well, these are the rough edges at this point that we're dealing with. And they were just being honest. They were trying to give a well-balanced review of what KMM was. But in the minds of the other engineers, all they heard were the negatives right initially. And then it over time, as they all started to experience it and get more close to the code, our iOS engineers became, very, very much central to the project and building the KMM. Yeah.
I would definitely read that blog post. Get some of your iOS engineers to co-author their experience there. That'd be so cool to read.
Yes, definitely. I actually, one of the reasons why I got into Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile was an article that I had a colleague at one of my previous companies write this article. It was like this hot take article on, and he's an iOS engineer, but he investigated the tech, and he was like, actually, this could really work. And it kind of convinced me because initially I was like, oh, the iOS engineers aren't going to do this. They're just going to we'll talk when it's stable. We'll talk when it's in version 2. We'll talk later. No, never. but he actually convinced me. And his second name is Colin. So it's nice to hear that there's quite a lot of iOS engineers as well. We've had, I know on Talking Kotlin, we've had somebody from Todoist talk about, as an iOS engineer, talk about their experiences and so on. And we keep on hearing, iOS engineers saying, actually, this is pretty cool. So we're excited to hear that, definitely. Colin, what technical challenges did you encounter using Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile? What things were sort of sticky and did you struggle with?
It's a very good question. We're still encountering issues to this day. It's not all perfect. Everything's streamlined. One of them for a long time was there was no support for composite builds. So if you wanted to work on a shared library and in the meantime use it in both projects, and kind of like have the Gradle handle that for you, that was broken. And they're just now, there's a fix out. It's not available until like alphas basically, but that was one challenge. We've seen some challenges have been fixed over time, like a lot of the early issues with we had outstanding experience for iOS with the translations. They say it's better than their existing translation flow going through KMM using Mocha resources, right? But for example, in the early days, they didn't really know how to use, say, plurals or some of these things, and the library had some rough edges, and as things have smoothed out, everything's improving. Another one, Kotlin date time. So in KMM, you have to access dates because every app needs dates, right? But in the early days, they weren't even promising eventual support down the line for formatting international dates and times. It was basically a library for doing date math, and you would have to construct your own strings on the fly. A lot of these things are improving. Just month to month, you see great strides made in the quality of the KMM libraries. Yeah,
cool.
I can't stop thinking about what Annyse said about there was an iOS developer who sent her a letter about all the things that were wrong with. Are you? Because I imagine it's not just the technical challenges that iOS developers were thinking of when they're like, hey, I don't really want this. What other sorts of pushback were you getting from the iOS side? I need to know more.
Yeah. So, for example, one person had done a lot of work with React Native before. So and they had a bad experience. And so if you mention cross-platform, they immediately go to React Native in their mind. And the only thing they can focus on were the bad experiences that they had. And in this particular case, they had to rewrite the application. So they were like, oh, I've tried this at another company with React Native. We ended up having to rewrite the entire application. It didn't bring all the promises, et cetera, et cetera. And from my perspective, I'm the kind of person that says, well, what's the worst that can happen? So that's what we did. I went through the essay, and for every paragraph, I put a response. And then I scheduled a real, meeting IRL over Zoom. And I just did, what's the worst that can happen? Like right now, tell me, what is the absolute worst thing that can happen? They're like, well, we'd have to rewrite the Kotlin business logic in Swift for iOS. That's literally the worst thing that could happen. And we're going to give it a try. Yep. And every week, report back to me if you run into any issue which you feel would prevent us from moving forward with this project. I'm completely open to switching gears. But keep in mind, the worst possible thing that could happen is we'd have to rewrite some business logic from Kotlin to Swift for the iOS side. And literally that is it. So it's I think that really helps kind of say okay, you know what? That's fair. If that's the worst that can happen, big deal. Kotlin, Swift. It was very similar looking. They could do it. They knew Kotlin already. And then also the fact that I'm saying, as a leader of this company, every week you have a license to tell me, no, abandon ship. This is not working. And I'm here. I'm here and I'm listening. And so I think that's just really important to, a quote I heard recently, which I really love, is that a change imposed is a change opposed. If you try to force something on someone, it's very likely that they will just reject it, even if it makes sense. And so you have to find a way to get around that, because that's how we are as humans. We fear the unknown, we fear change.
I love that approach. It makes me think of treating things as an experiment. And this person had kind of turned it into, this is a hypothesis that things are going to go wrong. Now, what is the worst thing that could go wrong? And then let's test that hypothesis. So that's where you're giving that license of every week you can come back and be like, hey, I was right. This is a terrible thing.
Exactly.
And continue to iterate there. I love that approach. I had I was reading Colin's blog post. I know nothing about Kotlin. Could you tell us, I love that title. Could you tell us something about exception handling, what you were handling, and how between Kotlin and Swift, how nothing helped you through that?
We were, this is interesting. We were having a mobbing session, and it turned into this Laurel and Hardy skit, because the word nothing has significant meaning in Kotlin. And nobody else in the room, even experienced Kotlin practitioners, knew what the nothing type was in Kotlin, which is fine. It's kind of esoteric. So I tried to explain, but then immediately it's I already am passing nothing at the end of this function. It was essentially a unit function. What happened was we were writing error handlers, and when you're writing an error handler, you typically want to throw. In fact, we throw it in every single case. So if you return unit, you're actually saying that this function is going to have to return at some point rather than throwing. So we all learned something that day, and it made a very funny pun-laced blog post on nothing.
I was wondering why you didn't call it much ado about nothing.
I think I made that joke in the piece.
Oh, okay. So when I was talking to Justin about your article, I remembered a Kotlin Conf talk in 2018 when it was also again in Amsterdam. And Nat Price had this talk on the type system, and he really spoke about nothing. He explained it really well, and we'll add the link in the description for this podcast. But it was probably one of the best talks that I've heard about the type system, and it really explains nothing really well.
Nothing more to say about that.
Nothing more to say about that. Annyse, what advice would you give folks in positions of technical leadership, that when they're trying to make a decision on whether to move to Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing I learned is you will need initially more Android engineers than iOS on your team. I think at first we were trying to kind of do half and half like normal teams, but it actually pays to have someone who's more experienced with Kotlin on the team, because the expectation can't be that they're also contributing to the UI portion on the same amount that they're contributing to the KMM portion. So maybe just one or two more Android Kotlin engineers than your typical team, the balance between iOS and Android. Also, I would say in the beginning, they were moving slower, and I think the team needed more direction, not to the extent of being like a micromanager, but for setting clear outcomes. So like I said in the beginning, I was just kind of explore it, learn what you can we do translation? Yeah, it was just it was a very hippie style. We're mobbing and holding hands and just learning things. And I think they got too deep in the weeds because of it. Because then some of the iOS engineers were like, well, what about multi-threading? And how am I going to handle this? And how are we going to handle that? And what is this screen thing? And they were so worried about stuff that honestly they weren't even going to encounter. And I had to just say wait 1 second. How often do you have to deal with it in your current iOS programming? And how often is it likely you will deal with it in the KMM case? Oh, that's really rare. Okay, let's bookmark this one and come back to it later and move on to the next thing. So at some point, they kind of needed someone, with a gavel being okay, you've explored enough. Let's move on to the next phase of work. And that might be tricky depending on your background to be able to say, as a technical leader, we're good here. We're going to start building something real, and enough of the going wide and trying to cover every single possible scenario you might encounter with KMM. Let's just focus on the actual feature and get it out there.
Yeah. What I'm really taking from what you've said just now and before as well is bringing that sense of perspective to the technology and to what the team is doing, which is really like a really good leadership gift. Justin?
Yeah, not many leaders are going to have the same gifts that you do, Annyse. And engineers may be in a position where the managers are less receptive, or they need different ways of being convinced of trying new technology. Do you have any insight into how engineers could bring this to managers?
Yeah, I think it's about developer efficiency and speed to market. And also I try to approach it from the perspective of maintenance and bug fixing. So if there's an issue, we need to add a new field to our tracking schema. Now we have to add the new field to our tracking schema in 4 different apps on 4 different databases, update the migration. Like, we're just duplicating, triplicating work for no reason versus, oh, hey, everyone, we decided to change the schema. Can you update that library? And then boom, everyone else gets the benefit. So I approached it like I've seen it personally. Everyone, we need you to pull down a new field from GraphQL. Okay. And then I start seeing the PRs come in, and it's like, this team has a PR with the new field, and then they added the new UI. This team has a PR with the new field, and then they added in the UI. The same exact GraphQL query, just in 2 different repos. And then once you add another app, now it's in 3, 4 different repos, and it's all doing the same thing. It's almost like, a level of insanity that you keep, doing this work again and again and again. And I see it like a time and time again. And so for me, it was like, we're such a small company. It doesn't make sense to keep duplicating all of these efforts. So it's looking at it from that perspective, not so much like the initial launch of the application might be a little bit slower than traditional development. But then moving forward, the pace at which they've been able to add new features is so impressive. Like, really, I know Colin could probably say every 2 weeks, they basically launch a new feature for iOS and Android for organizers on that KMM application. It's like honestly really impressive.
That's amazing to hear. Colin, in terms of advice for developers that want to learn Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile, how do they get started? How do they get productive? What did you use to get started?
Honestly, in the early days, a lot of the best documentation came from TouchLab. They actually wrote most of the Kotlin multi-platform docs that are out there as the official docs today. And that just gets you your feet wet, kind of. I think once you start digging into the library ecosystem, it's actually grown incredibly rich over the last couple of years. I would say, like when I first tried doing Kotlin multi-platform, everything was an interface. You had to expect and actual, and you had to write both implementations. Nowadays, there's just so many opportunities where you can actually save yourself having to write 2 different code bases. You can have a library that provides all of that to you. I will say that it hasn't always been easy for the developers. On iOS, there's the fact that it's Objective-C when the translation happens. And that's, what we've done to get around that is to create a mapping. But the hope is down the road that eventually even this will be sorted out by the KMM team, because once that's there, I think it makes it a lot more of a pleasant experience as somebody coming over from playing iOS development in Swift to working on KMM.
Absolutely. Yeah, as far as I know, there's a TouchLab initiative in the works, and definitely a JetBrains initiative in the works to make that Swift UI, the Swift and the Objective-C interop just that much smoother.
Yeah, we're working closely with JetBrains on that, and I do want to make clear we did not pay Colin to say that TouchLab has the best resources to look at. The community is continuing to grow.
We should have paid more.
Yeah, I mean, TouchLab always wanted to be at the forefront and the center of the community in Kotlin Multiplatform. So we're happy that the community is continuing to grow, and there's more and more people and other companies that are writing about KMM and are creating resources from different perspectives that can help people in different ways. And yeah, this Swift interop, it's we're creating a tool. It's in alpha testing right now. Be happy to talk with Meetup about trying it out. And Colin, you're going to be giving a talk at Colin Conf. Could you give us a brief overview of what you're going to be talking about?
Essentially, the talk is going to be about, how the first time I approached KMM, like I said, I had to write everything for both platforms. This time when we went at it as a company building a product, there were so many libraries and a very strong library ecosystem that made my development decision very easy to go ahead and keep pushing at this and making it, the way we do all of our development. So it's really about the library ecosystem of KMM, about how far they've come with KTOR and Apollo and SQL Delight and all the Mocha libraries and TouchLab libraries. There's a lot to go over there, and I was just decided I was going to do kind of like a beginner talk, because people want to get their feet wet. They want to say, what's there initially that I can jump in and start using without having to know both platforms really, really well.
Yeah. Good luck for your talk, Colin. Annyse, as a GDE for Android, what can we expect from you in the future? Like, what talks do you have in the pipeline? Any sneak peeks into what you're busy with?
Yeah. Let's see. So I'm always busy with a lot. So things that I've been thinking about, it's like kind of from two perspectives. I typically have like a like communications, emotional intelligence thing going on, and then a technical piece. So this year I've been thinking a lot about change and how leaders can prepare their teams for change. What does that look like? And like how to even prepare yourself for change. If we think about what happened to tech companies in 2022, unfortunately, over 150,000 tech workers were laid off. Do you think all of those people were expecting that change? What about their teams and the businesses themselves? Like, there's so much change and there's nothing to indicate that change will ever stop, right? That is a constant. So what can you do to prepare yourself? So that's something that I've been thinking a lot about and sort of preparing some material around. The next sort of technical Android specific thing is actually related to Google Play billing.
Okay.
That's something that come up on our team, and I've had to do a lot of like reading and investigating. And so like migrating from one payment processor to using Google Play billing, what are the different things that you need to keep in mind? What does that integration look like? And then what are the benefits? So like I had to write about like, what is the percent cut that Google takes? How does it change the distribution of the people who purchase a subscription? And sort of like, what is the business case for this? So what are the upsides? And that's something that I've been thinking a lot about over the past, I'll say 2-3 months. Actually, maybe, 2-3 months. I've been thinking about that and doing a lot of research. We introduced a new subscription product on Meetup. So that was like my first time really looking into Google Play billing and learning more about it. And I would like to at least write some documentation or like a blog post or something to kind of share that experience in my takeaways.
Yeah. As somebody who's dug into Google Play billing before and one of my previous companies, I think that article will be a massive hit because it's very, very tricky piece of work that you have to do to just get the basics done. So I think that I hope that it goes really well for you. Colin and Annyse, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you talking to us today. Any final words, Justin?
Yeah, well, I want to thank you both as well. Both of you so involved with the community. Got to thank you for that and sharing all your insights on the show today. It was super cool to hear about how Meetup is sharing more and more code in production with Kotlin Multiplatform. I also want to thank the watchers and listeners, of course. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss Pamela and I chat with more guests using Kotlin Multiplatform in production. And take care,
Cool.
everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.